I never thought a simple ping on my phone could unravel years of carefully stacked composure. But today, as I sat by the floor-to-ceiling window of my downtown apartment, the city's skyline reflecting off my polished coffee table, that familiar vibration felt like a small earthquake. I adjusted the silk blouse I had chosen for this morning's meeting, the soft fabric brushing against my wrist, and took a slow sip of my black coffee, letting the aroma ground me. The message preview made my stomach twist. "Hey, we really missed you at the wedding. Wish you were there." My brother's name flashed in my mind like an old wound, a memory of being intentionally left out, even though I had footed nearly every bill for that day. I could almost hear their whispered justification. "She outshines the groom." I had smiled politely then, swallowed the hurt, and nodded at their excuse like it made sense. But inside, the anger and disbelief never faded. I leaned back in my chair, my eyes tracing the movement of sunlight across the hardwood floor. My apartment was quiet, filled with the faint hum of city life outside. Every detail, from the hand-picked artwork to the small stack of unpaid invoices that no one else knew I handled, was proof of the life I built on my own terms. And yet, this single message pulled the past into the present, daring me to confront it. Some part of me wanted to reply, to justify, to explain. But another, quieter part, the one that had survived countless slights, smiled inwardly. Today, I was no one's shadow. It had all started years ago, in the cramped living room of my parents' house, the wallpaper peeling slightly at the corners, the faint smell of cinnamon from my mother's baking lingering in the air. I was 24, fresh out of graduate school, full of ideas, ambition, and a naive belief that family would celebrate my victories as much as their own. But that day, I realized how wrong I was. My brother had just announced his engagement, and my excitement for him was genuine. I offered to help with the wedding preparations, even volunteered to cover a chunk of the costs. They were struggling, and I wanted to support them. I had thought generosity would be met with gratitude. Instead, the words hit me like a cold slap. "We can't have you there all dressed up and stealing attention. You outshine the groom." I remember the sting clearly, the sudden lump in my throat, the way my hands shook as I set down the envelope of money on the table, trying to mask the tremor. My heart thudded painfully, not just from embarrassment, but from disbelief. How could the people who were supposed to love me more than anyone else deem my success a threat? I fled to the small balcony outside my room, the summer air hot against my cheeks, trying to make sense of the humiliation. And then I noticed it, the tiny porcelain bird my grandmother had given me years ago, perched on the windowsill. She had told me once, in a voice soft yet firm, "Never dim your light for anyone. The world will catch up to your shine eventually." That moment became my anchor. I clutched the bird in my palm, feeling the smoothness of its wings, and made a silent vow. I would not let anyone define my worth. I would leave the family's narrow definitions of success behind, build something solely my own, and prove, not to them, but to myself, that my light could never be dimmed by envy or fear. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and golds, I had made a decision. I would step into the world alone if I had to, chase my ambitions relentlessly, and let my life become the answer they never wanted to hear. The first few months after that night on the balcony were the hardest. I moved into a modest apartment on the edge of the city, the kind with creaky floors and a view of the train tracks, and threw myself into work. Freelance projects at first, small contracts, almost invisible, but each one was a step away from the life that had tried to clip my wings. I carried that little porcelain bird in my bag everywhere, a constant reminder that my ambition was not a crime. I met her by chance, Clara, a seasoned consultant in the financial sector who ran her own boutique firm. I had approached her for advice on a small project I was managing, expecting a polite dismissal. Instead, she looked me in the eyes and said, "You're underestimated, and that's their loss. But not yours. Let me show you how to make them pay attention to what actually matters, results." Her confidence was magnetic, and for the first time, someone saw the potential I had always felt, even when my family could not. The work was grueling. Long nights blurred into early mornings. I learned to juggle spreadsheets and client calls, marketing strategies, and networking events. Self-doubt was constant. Every failure felt like proof that maybe I didn't belong. But slowly, the wins began to accumulate. The first big client came almost by accident, a recommendation from Clara. I remember sitting at my tiny kitchen table, staring at the signed contract, disbelief and pride mingling so fiercely that I couldn't stop myself from laughing aloud. Then came my first profitable project, followed by another, and then another. Each small success was a brick in the foundation of my independence. I never bragged to anyone back home. My family believed I was still struggling in a series of modest jobs, posting only vague social media updates, pictures of coffee cups, a bookshelf, or a park. They had no idea that I had built a career from scratch, one that could rival anyone in our city, including my brother. I also invested time in learning the nuances of leadership, how to manage a team, inspire loyalty, and keep the integrity of my work intact. I remembered the sting of exclusion every time I faced a setback, and it fueled me rather than paralyzed me. By the time I started hiring my first employees, the tiny apartment balcony felt like a distant memory, replaced by an office space that reflected my taste, vision, and relentless drive. Through it all, that little porcelain bird sat on my desk, wings outstretched, as if reminding me every morning that I had made the choice to shine. And shine I did, quietly, powerfully, and far beyond the expectations of the people who had tried to leave me out of the most important day of my family's life. The invitation arrived a week before the family dinner, written in my brother's neat, familiar handwriting. "We'd love to see you. It's been a long time." A thin smile curved across my face as I read it. They expected me to show up quietly, like a shadow, still struggling with life, as they had always assumed. But this time, I would arrive on my own terms. The night of the dinner, I parked my car outside the familiar suburban home, but nothing inside would feel familiar to them anymore. I wore a tailored emerald dress that complemented my skin, and my hair fell in soft waves around my shoulders. The faint scent of jasmine perfume lingered in the air as I stepped out, holding my small leather clutch in one hand, the porcelain bird I had carried for years tucked inside. I wasn't there to ask for recognition. I was there to quietly, undeniably claim it. The living room greeted me first. The same floral sofa, the same coffee table with the chipped corner, but now there were subtle shifts. Their eyes widened as soon as they saw me. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's hands froze mid-motion, dabbing at the salad bowl. And my brother, well, he looked as if he had seen a ghost that somehow shone brighter than he ever could. I let them take it all in. I didn't rush. I allowed my heels to click deliberately on the hardwood floor, the sound echoing just enough to break the tension. Then I led them to the office I had insisted on showing, my sanctuary. Expensive artwork lined the walls, abstract pieces I had personally chosen. A sleek desk gleamed under the soft overhead light, stacked with awards and certificates, along with a laptop open to my company's latest quarterly report. Every detail spoke of precision, success, and independence. Finally, I spoke, my voice calm but firm. "I'm glad you all could come tonight. I know it might be surprising to see this, but this is my life. The business, the clients, the achievements, everything I've worked for. I didn't need anyone's approval, and yet, I still contributed to what mattered to this family, even when I wasn't invited to share in the celebrations." There was silence. My mother's eyes glistened, my father's face betrayed disbelief, and my brother's lips parted, searching for words that never came. I continued, letting each sentence land with measured weight. "For the wedding you celebrated without me, I paid for nearly every detail. And I did it because I believed in family. But I am not the person who can be dimmed to make someone else feel secure. My success is mine, and it stands regardless of your discomfort." I watched their expressions carefully. The guilt was there, raw and undeniable, but so was astonishment. They had imagined me still struggling, living modestly, waiting for their acknowledgement. Instead, they were faced with someone confident, accomplished, and unshakable, someone whose life had flourished in spite of exclusion, not because of their acceptance. And in that moment, I realized the power had shifted. The awkward silence, the slow intake of breath, the stammered apologies, they were all tokens of the recognition I had never sought, but had quietly earned. For the first time in years, I felt fully in control of the room, and not in a domineering way, but in a way that came from quiet confidence, from knowing my worth and refusing to bend to old patterns. My family was stunned, frozen between shame and awe, but I didn't rush to fill the silence. I let them sit with the weight of what they had done, and what they had missed. Finally, I spoke, deliberate and measured. I'm willing to help, but on my terms. This isn't about punishment. It's about growth, responsibility, and respect. My father shifted in his chair, eyebrows knitting, sensing that this wasn't going to be a speech about forgiveness, without accountability. My mother's hands wrung together, unsure whether to nod or protest. My brother's jaw was tight, silent, as though he was bracing himself for conditions he had never considered before. I started with my brother, the one who had tried to cast me as a shadow. If you want my involvement in your life or future projects, you need to respect my boundaries. No more dismissing my accomplishments or trying to compete with me. You will approach me as an equal, not a rival. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the pride that had once driven him now quietly bending under the weight of truth. Turning to my mother, I said, I want to see you pursue the things that make you happy, not just what's expected of you. Stop living through the achievements of others and focus on your own growth. Her tears came silently, and I allowed them. Compassion didn't mean weakness. It meant recognizing the potential for change. My father, ever the traditionalist, received his condition last. You've always believed success is measured by control. Learn to celebrate it in others, not just impose it. Stop letting fear dictate how you treat people, especially your own children. I spoke slowly, ensuring every word landed, every expectation was clear. Then I paused, looking around the room. The porcelain bird from my grandmother, which I had placed on the corner of the desk, caught the light. It reminded me why I had endured the rejection, the silent envy, and the hurt. Each of my conditions reflected not revenge, but the principles that had guided me to this point: respect, independence, and authenticity. They listened, really listened, and I could feel the subtle shift in energy, the hesitation, the openness, the awareness that life no longer had to be constrained by old dynamics. I wasn't their adversary. I was a mirror, reflecting what they had overlooked: potential, dignity, and the courage to change. By the end of the evening, I had laid out each condition, each boundary, with clarity and grace. I didn't need them to immediately meet my standards. I only needed them to start acknowledging the truth, that I would no longer be sidelined, and that my power, hard-won, steady, undeniable, was now part of our shared reality. For the first time, I felt the room breathe differently. Not in fear, not in awe, but in recognition of who I was, what I had built, and that my success could no longer be ignored. Weeks passed, and change began to take root, quietly but undeniably. My brother approached me one morning, sheepish yet determined, with a proposal for a joint project, not to compete, not to overshadow, but to collaborate. I smiled, the familiar lump of old resentment replaced with cautious hope. He had started respecting the boundaries I had set, and for the first time, our relationship felt balanced. My mother enrolled in a painting class she had always dreamed of but never pursued, her hands smudged with colors, laughter spilling freely. It was a small act, but it carried weight, the first step toward reclaiming joy she had long denied herself. My father, surprisingly, began mentoring a young entrepreneur at his firm, learning to celebrate someone else's achievements without judgment. I watched all of this with a quiet sense of satisfaction, realizing that the conditions I had set were not cages, but catalysts for growth. And me? I returned to my office, to the city I had built from scratch, to the life I had carved out with sheer determination. The porcelain bird, still perched at the corner of my desk, seemed to glow in the morning light. It was more than a keepsake now. It was a testament to resilience, a symbol of the journey from rejection to empowerment. Every time I glanced at it, I remembered the young woman on that balcony, trembling but determined, vowing never to let her light be dimmed. I thought about the pain I had endured, the nights spent questioning my worth, the sharp sting of exclusion at what should have been a family celebration. And I realized those moments had forged the woman I had become, confident, resilient, and unapologetically ambitious. I had turned their attempt to silence me into the motivation to rise higher, to shine brighter, and to live authentically. Sitting by the window, watching the city pulse beneath me, I breathed deeply. There was no triumph in revenge, no satisfaction in proving them wrong. The victory lay in my independence, my ability to love and forgive without compromising my boundaries, and the courage to step into my full power. I lifted the little porcelain bird in my hands, feeling the smooth wings beneath my fingers, and whispered to myself, I built my life, my way, and nothing can take that away. And for the first time in years, I smiled, not at what I had endured, but at the woman I had become. Strong, radiant, unstoppable. Bottom of form,